good to see all of you. Some of you I can see genuine. And so, so I don't know what happened to my cup. I have a cup of drink somewhere earlier on my desk. I have moved my desk. But anyway, so I know all of you, or probably all of you, is doing some kind of virtual rehearsal right now. And I don't know about you, but I am definitely not a computer person. But so luckily we have Ryan Roger, who is both. He's a choir director in high school. Oh, here's my cup. Here's my cup. Have my drink back. And so Ryan is going to help us walking through a couple of different ways how to do rehearsal online. So everybody, please welcome Ryan Roger. Ryan, take it away.
Hey there, everybody. Thank you, T, for that fantastic introduction. We're going to jump right into it. Please know that I'm going to breeze through a lot of this stuff rather quickly, but that all of these resources will be online for you afterward for free, including the PowerPoint and a more detailed outline of the presentation at realsolutionstovirtualproblems.com. So without further ado, we are first going to discuss some rehearsal tools, and then we're going to talk very briefly at the end about virtual performances kind of as a whole in general. So resources for asynchronous and synchronous virtual choir rehearsals. A little bit about me before we get started. This is my third year of teaching at North Shore Senior High in Galena Park ISD. Outside of school, I'm a staff tenor at Palmer Episcopal Church, and I do some singing around town with the Houston Bach Society. I graduated in 2018 from the University of Houston, go Cougs, and I majored in piano performance, choral music ed, and before that I was a student of the amazing Kay Sherrill in San Antonio, Texas at Judson High School. So today's discussion. Today we are going to talk about resources and plausible solutions for virtual rehearsals, and I put that rehearsals in quotes because, you know, it's not gonna exactly resemble what we do face-to-face in real life when everybody is there. But all of these resources are useful in a variety of instructional methods, whether it be hybrid, fully online, some people in person, some people online, or anything in between. And we are focused on ensemble-based instruction in this presentation, and specifically on how we can hear and evaluate every single musician's progress on a regular basis. So what today's discussion is not, it is not a one-stop shop for rolling out virtual instruction today. To be able to implement a lot of these tools requires some practice for both the ensembles and some planning for the directors. And today is also not inclusive of really vital social emotional learning, community building, non-musical teaching, etc. That is a really necessary while we are in a virtual environment. It is also not universally applicable to every program. You know, only you are going to know your musicians and what they're going to be capable of, and only you are going to know what you are going to be able to implement successfully. It is also not exhaustive. There are so many resources out there. If you go back to this presentation, there's a link to the Oak gigantic spreadsheet of resources, as well as the Team EA one that Ms. Good is putting together. It is also not a long-term substitute for live performance art. And this is probably one of the biggest things. I was talking with Dr. Weber from U of H about some of these resources several weeks back. And, you know, she was just saying, yeah, great, but it's, you know, it's not authentic. It's not what we do in real life. And she is 100% correct. And I am really looking forward to the day when we don't have to rely on a lot of these tools as much. So just putting that out there. It is also not an overview of the Music First suite. They have their own free webinar. I'm not really touching anything within that suite except for Soundtrap, which we will get to very shortly. So virtual asynchronous rehearsals. What is that? Basically, it is a rehearsal component of instruction that the teacher has pre-recorded. Students then record themselves participating along with that pre-recorded audio on their own, And the challenge that we face in this kind of setting is how are we going to line up 50 plus, or even more than that, singers audio in a user-friendly interface. Now, there are some really unique challenges that come with this type of instruction, namely that the rehearsal is fixed. You have no ability to be responsive to what's going on in front of you. The director must also anticipate problems and try and mitigate those things while recording. Feedback for singers is no longer immediate, and we have a somewhat limited ability to address balance, blend, etc., because those are all things that we need that live performance art component to be able to effectively address. But in this kind of environment, there are some real teaching benefits to taking this type of approach. You can, as a director, go back and listen to the rehearsal recording, just like you recorded your in-person rehearsal. And individual students can also be isolated for really specific feedback, which is one of the most awesome things about this tool, is that you can listen to an individual student's track. And then you can tailor follow-up lessons to specific groups of students. So for example, a lesson for just those who messed up measure 3 rhythm, or just those who are having difficulty navigating between registers. And lastly, your rehearsals can and really probably should be short and to the point. We can address 1 or 2 specific challenges thoroughly without taking up a whole lot of time. So this resource that we are going to experiment with in just a few minutes here, Soundtrap.com. Essentially, Soundtrap is an online digital audio workstation. Think like Audacity, but it is 100% online and it syncs to the cloud. There is a free version of this, which has all of the functionality that you could need to use it for this purpose. And there is also an educational version, which is paid. The main difference there being that there's Google Classroom integration with the educational version. And there are a number of other key differences. Free accounts are not exactly intended for users under the age of 13. That is in their privacy policy. And the ability to import accounts from Google Classroom is extremely helpful. You don't have to go in and set up a new account for every student or even have them sign up on their own. You can just create them directly from your Google Classroom. And you can also integrate this with other learning management systems as well, whether you're using Schoology or Canvas or anything else that's out there. Lastly, there is walled garden protection in the EDU version, which just means that your students cannot interact outside of your bubble, and they're not able to contact people that are not associated with your EDU set of accounts. The best part about this is that there is no download necessary on a computer. It is amazing. And that means that it works with Chromebooks, which is a godsend for us because we have nothing but Chromebooks, basically, and iPads for the younger ones. But there's also a fully functional iPhone and an Android app. So if your students don't have a computer at home, they can use a smartphone to access and use Soundtrap. And there is no equipment beyond headphones needed, though they really should be wired and not Bluetooth, because Bluetooth can introduce some latency and things may not line up as well. You can get away without using headphones. You'll just hear some of the pre-recorded audio in the student's recording. So I try and emphasize the need for having wired headphones because it just makes it sound so much cleaner. So we're gonna, oh, wrong computer. There we go. This that you're seeing on your screen right now is a very cursory overview of the program features. So basically down here you have your play controls, and of course the little thing gets in the way, but there's a record button, stop button, play button, fast forward, rewind, and all that. You have mute buttons, and you'll select these if you do not want to hear that particular track. And there are also solo buttons, which allow you to hear only that particular track. And then other than that, the interface is very straightforward. When you get in there, it is important for you to click add new track so that you have your own space to record in. And then you'll select voice and microphones from the little dialog box that comes up when you're recording when you're recording yourself singing. So we are going to watch a brief instructional video to show you kind of how to access Soundtrap, and then we have a very short rehearsal demonstration on Soundtrap for us all to participate in.
No audio. No audio.
We're not getting audio?
No, there's no audio.
Of course, and we tested extensively right before we started, and of course in a technology presentation is when the audio does not work properly. So let me take my headphones out and see if that helps. My name is Ryan Rogers, and today I'll be showing you how to access and use soundtrap.com. You should receive a link from your director, either through email, or if your ensemble uses Google Classroom, through Google Classroom. You'll go ahead and follow that link or copy and paste it into your address bar. And then Soundtrap should prompt you to create an account. You're usually going to want to go ahead and sign up with whatever Google account you use. So I'm going to go ahead and click sign up with Google. And then if you are a public school student, go ahead and use your public school Google account. If you're a Galena Park ISD student, make sure you're using your GP Apps account. Otherwise, if you're not a school district singer or performer, go ahead and use whatever preferred Gmail account you already have. So I'm going to go ahead and select the GP Apps account for now. We'll then ask you to select your country. You'll select US, enter your date of birth. I'm just going to enter a random date of birth for now. And then once you have created your account, the project should open for you right away. Now, once you have already created an account, you'll just log into your Soundtrap account using the same Google portal, and it won't ask you to enter your personal information once you already have the account. So since this is my first time logging on, you can go ahead and walk through the tutorial. I'm going to skip it for now and just show you how to get started pretty quickly for our purposes. So I'm going to X out of this. This window may open here. You can close it by clicking on the collaborator icon. Don't worry about this icon for now. So once you have logged onto Soundtrap, you should have a rehearsal track that's already loaded into the project. And then on this particular project, you'll see that there are some practice tracks that are already recorded. I went ahead and sang the bass part, the tenor part, the alto part, and the soprano part for this particular project. Now, when you log on, you will want to go ahead and start off by creating a new track for yourself. I'm going to select voice and microphones since this is a choral rehearsal. And for the most part, you will almost always select voice and microphones, even if you're playing an instrument. These are software instruments that would be used if your director specifically asks you to select one of those. So for the most part, you're always going to select voice and microphones. Now, when you are using this software, the first time it will probably pop up with a window that asks you, are you using headphones? You should always use headphones when you are recording on Soundtrap. Otherwise, it can create a feedback loop, and we'll hear some of the sound of the practice track in your recording if you don't use headphones. So you really need to make sure that you have headphones, and it is extremely important that you use wired headphones. Do not use Bluetooth headphones or like AirPods, because there will be a delay when you hear the track, and things will not sync up properly if you do that. So please go ahead and use wired headphones for making recordings on Soundtrap. Once you have selected that you are using wired headphones, you'll go ahead and hit start recording. If you have done anything else, clicked anywhere else before you start recording, it will be very important that you make sure this purple playhead right here is all the way at the beginning of the track. So I moved it all the way over to the number 1. The reason for that is when we download the tracks for use for editing, if you haven't started at the beginning, like these practice tracks are not started at the beginning, it will cause problems for us when we are editing everything together. So you'll always want to start at the beginning. In this particular Soundtrap file, there's some talking at the beginning to kind of introduce things. This one is actually a test of a rehearsal. So if your director is using Soundtrap to rehearse, you may have some talking at the beginning. Go ahead and listen to that talking every time. Start your practice track at the beginning, even though, or start your recording at the beginning, even though the practice tracks may not look like they start at the beginning. You'll want to go ahead and make sure you start there when you record. And then you'll hit start recording. It'll count you off. You'll hear everything on your headphones, and you will participate as you normally would if you were there in person. There is one more feature that I do want to let you know about before the end of this video, and that is muting. So your director will give you specific instructions on what to do for this, but if you get into a project and you're recording on Soundtrap and you notice that you're hearing other people's recorded files while you're trying to record, or if you want to hear just one of the particular practice tracks that are already there, you can use this button right here to mute tracks. Now, you don't want to mute the rehearsal track ever, because that's what you're going to be using to line yourself up with. But like, say if I'm a tenor, I don't want to hear the bass track, I just want to hear the tenor track, and then I'm not going to want to hear the alto or the soprano track. And that will mean that these tracks that have the purple mute button on will not play back when I'm recording. I will only hear the ones that are not ghosted out like this. Thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to using soundtrap.com. Okay, there is one thing that I believe I inserted a different version of this video, but you do need to make sure at the end that you click the save button. Otherwise, your work will not be saved. So please do not forget to click the save button when you are done. Let me skip ahead. So it is time for a quick demo. You are going to be getting a link in the chat right now to some Soundtrap projects. You'll go ahead and follow that link and then select the button that is appropriate for your last name. And that will take you to a Soundtrap project where we will have a very brief warm-up. We will do a quick little canon, and then we're going to sing the first 5 measures of The Lord Bless You and Keep You. So I believe Nick has been sending the score for the Lutkin out on the chat. But if you're like me and have the first 4 or so measures memorized, then you may not need that. So please go ahead and click that link now. Go ahead and head to those buttons, and we will be back ready to go at 5:27. I did forget to mention, if you have any sort of tech issues, feel free to send something in the chat. We can try and help troubleshoot a little bit. Or if you run into significant issues and you're not able to actually get this done in this succinct amount of time, we, at the very end of the presentation, are able to provide some tech support and kind of help people out. Every so often, there's issues in loading the page properly, or you know, it may be a little bit easy to get lost if it's your very first time using the interface. So please don't fret over that. We will have some time at the very end to help you out if you have issues.
Hey Ryan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, give me 1 second. My headphones are driving me crazy. Okay, so, oh my goodness. When I'm recording, I'm getting this weird reverb, and my computer, even right now, is, maybe my computer is
It's
locked out. Hold
if
on.
you click the little image, the clip art looking image on the left side for your track of the microphone, there is actually a reverb toggle that you can click kind of in the center of the, here, let me back up.
Yeah, and it looks like it's all the way off.
Really? And you're getting,
Yeah, so,
still getting an
ooh.
echo?
Yes, and it's like really loud in my headphones. There's a big delay, and I'm using wired headphones.
You may want to try turning monitoring off. And the way that you do that is using this little cogwheel down here. And at least I think it's down there. Let me open up a project and make sure.
It might be under my settings. There it is. Hello?
There you go.
Oh my gosh, okay. So my recording is going to mess everything up because it's really bad and I only have 1 more minute to fix it. So I'm going to be the bad student today.
It's okay. When we were testing this out for the first time, we had a very creative band director at North Shore Senior High who went in and created some drum loops in there, and it was a joy to go back and hear some like congas going on in the background.
I did not save my track because I could not spare my own dignity.
Well,
Okay.
It's the experience that matters.
Right, no, and that's great. And it's an easy fix too.
Yeah.
What was weird though is that, so I saw the recording studio open and my computer was still like looping my voice back in, like the monitoring effect was still going on even though that I wasn't actively recording. It was carrying over between apps.
Yeah, the monitoring, if you have it open and monitoring is on, it will continue until you turn off, either turn off monitoring or close out of the Soundtrap project.
Yeah. Okay. We are learning.
We are learning, and I'm learning every day about the little ins and outs of Soundtrap and what really works and what's a little bit bumpy sometimes.
Right.
So if you did not, I'm seeing a couple people in the chat talking about not having headphones. Actually, interestingly, it is preferable to not have headphones at all than to using Bluetooth headphones. And the reason for that is because Bluetooth inherently is going to have some latency. So when you listen back, you'll be just like slightly behind where the rehearsal track is if you used Bluetooth headphones. Be clear. So program all this we're hearing. Oh yeah. Well, if you were not using headphones, then whatever dialogue we had over the Zoom call is probably in your track. But that's okay. You know, we're not going to be editing these recordings for publication or anything, so nothing to fear there. If you're really worried about it, you can go back in and delete your track if that's causing you grief, as it was for Jade. All right, so we have done our demo. Now let's talk about what it looks like from the student side of things, which you sort of just witnessed. But if you were to do something like this on Google Classroom, you would have many more hurdles to jump over. When you're doing this on Soundtrap, the steps look like this. You go to the project URL, sign up, or just log in if you already have an account with your Google account info. And if you're using Google Classroom and pay for the EDU accounts, it's just one click and you're in. You then need to plug in wired headphones, as long as you have those wired headphones. Click Add New Track, select Voice and Microphones, click Start Recording and Participate. Then click Save. I always keep forgetting. I don't know why I keep forgetting to remind people of the Save button, but the Save button is super important. However, if you were trying to do something like this in Google Classroom, first, your students would have to download a really large audio file from Google Drive. Then they would have to listen on their headphones and record while singing along. And not all devices can do those two things simultaneously, so they might need two devices. They then have to share and upload the audio file to Google Drive and make sure that they are on their school district account. Sorry, I left this as GP apps because this was originally for Galena Park. Then they have to navigate to the file on Drive, turn on sharing for the file, copy the link, return to Google Classroom, and paste the link into a comment on the assignment and click submit. It's like so many things. It's a whole litany of steps. Whereas on Soundtrap, the process is much simpler. And once you teach them where their few buttons are that they need to know how to use, they are good to go. And you might be surprised several weeks into the school year, they could be going and creating their own Soundtrap projects and blowing you away with what they can do with the software. A couple additional notes. Soundtrap also supports multitasking while recording. So you can listen, you can record, and you can see something. You can open a new tab after you hit record, or open it ahead of time and toggle over to the new tab to view sheet music. And this does also ensure that the audio of all of your singers will be synchronized unless someone were to accidentally or intentionally move pre-recorded audio, or if someone's using Bluetooth headphones, you might need to adjust them forward slightly. But if everybody uses the program properly, it will be perfectly synchronized for you. And then the ensemble can kind of have like a full quote unquote rehearsal with no or minimal time spent adjusting the audio by the director. It's simple to access, and it's also relatively straightforward to use as well. Whereas in Google Classroom, to be able to see, record, and hear at the same time, you may need up to 3 devices to access the audio and all that. It does not synchronize the audio, so if you wanted to put together something comparable to this, it would take a lot longer, whereas in Soundtrap, it's already done for you. This also requires a large file download, use of at least 3 applications, and understanding of sharing settings, etc. for Google Classroom. So I went ahead and put together some sample weekly Soundtrap lesson outlines so you can kind of get a picture of how I'm conceiving of actually using this in the classroom. I have 2 tracks. One is an advanced track where there's more self-guided learning and students complete many of the assignments outside of their scheduled class time. Synchronous class meetings are used more so for facilitating, updating students, and prepping any new concepts as needed. Whereas for the beginning groups, there's greater structure and scaffolding. Students use part of their synchronous class time to complete assignments. New concepts are introduced at the beginning of the synchronous meetings and later reinforced in the assignments that they complete in the second half of class time. So here's kind of my overview of what a week could look like in an advanced level group. You'll notice that there are only really 2 Soundtrap projects over the course of the week, one on Monday, one on Thursday. And this allots plenty of time for, number 1, the students to get on to record. And then number 2, for the director to go back, evaluate, decide how we're gonna move forward and record those follow-up rehearsals. And then I mixed in some, extra things in here, long-term independent project, which could be, solos, sight reading and literacy assignments, because we want to build those skills too, even while we're in a virtual context, and social emotional learning as well. Here is my proposed track for beginning groups. And I know I'm speeding through a lot of this really quickly, so if you're interested in learning about this a little bit more, go ahead and head to my website afterward, and everything will be available there. But essentially here, I'm building in some extra pre-teaching time, still 2 Soundtrap projects per week, and allotting plenty of time for the director to go back, listen, evaluate, and record follow-up rehearsals. Obviously, these are 5-day-a-week class plans. We are not actually on a 5-day-a-week schedule. We are a block schedule. So it could be easily adapted by shifting things back a day on the days that you don't meet, or by just kind of modifying what you actually accomplish over the course of the week, because if you're like us, sometimes we see a class 3 days a week, sometimes we see them 2 days a week. So there is another sort of alternative to Soundtrap out there. And I think this is useful if you don't have another learning management system that you're using, but you still want to have a means of using Soundtrap and having your stuff organized in assignments. Bandlab.com is essentially the same thing as Soundtrap, but integrated into its own learning management system. It's Soundtrap plus Google Classroom, essentially. So you have assignment templates, you have classes and groups. You can create automatic copies of each assignment for each class and group, which is kind of nice. You can't actually do that on Soundtrap. You have to create those copies yourself. Sharing to Google Classroom is also supported as an assignment, a poster, a topic, or whatever. There are some downsides, though, to this, I think, and that namely is that the collaboration mode is less ideal. You have to kind of hand off the baton to who has control over the recording process. The learning management system can be a little bit clunky and not as user-friendly. Some of the apps are not geared directly toward education, but they do still work. But the main issue that I have with using BandLab over Soundtrap is that you would essentially be linking Google Classroom, which is a learning management system, to another learning management system. But it is out there, and it essentially accomplishes the same thing. Here's just a look at what the interface looks like. Moving on, soundslice.com is something that we at North Shore Senior High have used for a long time. It's essentially online notation software that supports audio sync. Think like flat.io, but I think it's actually optimized a little bit better for playback. There is a built-in notation editor, or you can import a .music XML from Finale if you transcribe something into Finale. You can also toggle between various parts for display and playback. So you can turn on just the soprano part and hear just the soprano part, or select any number of combinations. Also, you have control over tempo and speed and transposition if you're using the playback of a MIDI file. So we definitely use SoundSlice a lot at North Shore, but we kind of are planning on using it in conjunction with Soundtrap. So SoundSlice would be used for students to practice independently, or for us to screen share on a live synchronous meeting. I also am going to address one thing that's not exactly rehearsal based, but this is a really fantastic asynchronous curriculum that was developed by Salil Menon for Fort Bend ISD. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but if you are interested in it, his contact information is here. He has an excellent video overview that is linked in this presentation on my website that you can watch. But it's awesome because it is appropriately sequenced, and it focuses on skills that the students will need when they come back into the classroom in person. And it also moves at a pace that's appropriate for virtual learning and is compatible with every learning management system out there. So I realize there are probably quite a few questions regarding the asynchronous rehearsal component here. We are going to go ahead and still save those for the sake of time. And Nick is keeping track of those questions, and we can address those at the end of this presentation. But I want to move on now to several synchronous rehearsal tools. Before I show you the tools, though, I want to talk about the primary method of synchronous rehearsals virtually right now. And that is the kind of Zoom camp method. That's a term that I coined myself. It is used mostly by summer choir camps this year. And it basically involves a Zoom meeting where all participants except the director mute themselves while the director models parts and students sing at home. In these circumstances, students can hear only the director singing and themselves, and the directors cannot hear anybody else. Any and all feedback has to be individual then. The students have to sing on their own without the director even performing along because of latency issues. And in order to be evaluated, that means that everyone on the call can hear them, which can be nerve-wracking for lots of students. I think it is a somewhat inefficient use of time because you have no idea what the group is going to sound like together. And if even you don't really even know if they've learned the notes and rhythms accurately. So that's not to say that we won't be using this. And that it is not necessary to a certain degree. But relying on this as your sole means of content delivery is not going to be as efficient for your use of time, and is not going to give you a very clear picture of where your students are at and what they're absorbing and what they're not able to comprehend. So there is a method out there that exists, and I will preface this by saying it exists. Just know that it exists, but that it is not ready to be rolled out right now. And that is something called the chain method. Essentially, it's a chain of one-way video and audio conferences. And it allows you to line up the singer's audio so that it can be evaluated by the director intelligibly while managing latency, so the director can simultaneously lead the rehearsal. We are about to go into a couple resources that I had to go way down a rabbit hole for. And for the sake of time, we are not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But if you are interested in this and want to learn more about it, this will all be on my website afterward. So fair warning, I'm going to skip through a lot of information very quickly because it is really dense. There are some challenges with this kind of instruction, namely that there is unavoidable latency, difficult to detect errors. It is also a one-way chain of audio, so the first singer cannot hear anybody following them. And there are numerous technological hurdles to overcome, from equipment to devices to numerous video conferences. So again, this is not ready to be rolled out in a classroom type setting, but could be used for smaller groups if you want to evaluate whether or not they have learned the notes and rhythms in a synchronous manner. There are some benefits. Obviously, you can go back and read these on your own, but this first diagram here is a test of a product called Synchrobox. And this was done at U of H. I'll let you go in and look through this and kind of comprehend it right now, but essentially we've got a one-way stream of video and audio, and the director starts it all, and everything comes back around so that they can hear everybody aligned perfectly at the end of the chain. Now there's some latency, so they can't exactly conduct while that's happening, but they can hear. Here's a description of the components and more information about how the setup works. This is a picture of kind of what it all looks like in the mess of tangled wires. The Synchrobox itself is essentially just a mixer here in the middle, and it connects the audio from one computer to another computer, which are on two different video conferences. So then after this testing, I thought, well, if you could get on two video conferences at once on one device, you could cut the number of devices needed in half. So I've sort of developed a chain method as well. Again, go ahead and head to my website if you want to read about this. Not ready to be rolled out, but could be useful if you want to go down that rabbit hole. But I do want to play just a very quick clip of what this sounds like, and I will preface this by saying that note that the audio quality is not very good. Oops. Come on. So, as you can hear, audio quality is terrible. You can't really discern anything about tone or even what vowel they're singing or whatever, but it is aligned and you can more or less discern pitch and rhythm. It's more or less just a proof of concept. Some notes on the latency. It's, again, going to be unavoidable in either of those previous scenarios, reduced by Ethernet connections if you're on the same network, but only the conductor experiences that latency. The singers get to perform as if they were there in person, and the conductor gets to hear perfectly aligned audio, but it is later than any conducting that they're doing. If you can get low enough latency with a setup like this, it is easier to manage by the conductor if they practice it a little bit. Here's some discussion about high latency like synchronous rehearsal options. The important thing here is that you can make something like this work if you pre-record like a conducting video with a audio track, and the singers, then you would just hit play and the singers line up to that, and you sit there with just the headphones evaluating on the other end of the chain, because the latency is going to be unavoidable. You can head to my website to read some more about that. This next resource is a streaming method that was developed by Ryan Jones of St. Luke's United Methodist. I gave you his contact information there, so if you're interested in this, feel free to reach out to him. We are also using a modified version of this to live stream rehearsals at Palmer, but essentially he's put together a list of what you would need to do something like this, but it is a stream of very high quality audio, and it would work fantastic. It would be fantastic in a setting like a church where you have staff singers, and essentially those people would come in person at a distance, and everybody on their own microphone would then be streamed out to the volunteers live. So the volunteers kind of have that experience of making music and the rehearsal experience, but you can also keep those people on the other end of the stream on the same page as you move through the rehearsal process. So if you're interested, again, go check out my website and contact Ryan Jones for more information about that. This is sort of just indicating that obviously with all of these options, that final end of the chain method or of the YouTube Live method could be an output to for a live performance. And the resource that we're about to get to would be a fantastic way of doing something like this. And that allows you to have an unedited live performance. So here is what I think is one of the most amazing tools that I have come across so far. And that is the Real-Time Music Solutions Coach. And they have a whole suite of programs. It's RMS Coach, RMS Mix, and Rehearsal Live Share, which is a component of those two programs. And it is essentially live synchronous rehearsing made simple. The cost is $99.99 a year for the director, but it is free for as many singers as you want to use it with. And essentially what this is the director is going to upload a MIDI track, and then the software uses that MIDI data coming from the director's computer, sends it to the participants, who then sing along with that reproduced MIDI data on their end, and their audio is sent back to the director along with the MIDI data. The software then uses the information from the MIDI to calculate each of the singer's latency, and it goes with the longest possible latency, and it lines everything up for you, and you can actually hear everybody perfectly synchronized. It is incredible, and the first time that I tested this was with Adam Bendorf, and I literally almost jumped out of my chair. It was so exciting because I hit play, a piano track started, and then he sang gibberish along with the piano track, but it was perfectly synchronized. It was absolutely incredible, jaw-dropping experience to finally kind of realize that. But the main limitation here is that it is one-way audio while you are rehearsing, which means, number one, you don't get to conduct. The students sing with the MIDI, but they don't get to hear everybody else. The software aligns all the audio for you, and you have control over the mix using one of their tools on there where you can edit everybody's volume. But again, the singers are in isolation when they're doing this. Now, RMS Mix does have support for existing MP3 or WAV files. And what you do for that is you upload a MIDI track, and then you upload the audio file, and you can use the MIDI data to sync all the singers together, but it plays the audio file. So you could conceivably record a practice track, upload it along with the MIDI, and have everybody get on Rehearsal Live Share and participate that way. And by the way, that audio track that you use for this could be a Soundtrap file that you have recorded from a previous asynchronous rehearsal. So these are just some options. Note that right now, the limit for RMS Coach, Mix, and Rehearsal Live Share is 20 people simultaneously, the director plus 19. But I have been in contact with the developers, and they are if you specifically request it, they can send you a build of the program that is unlocked and doesn't limit you on the number, but they say limit 20 because that's the max that they have tested currently. So if you reach out to their support, they are amazing at replying promptly. I sent them an email at like 10 p.m. and got a response within 10 minutes. It was amazing. But I have a very brief test video of something that was done just this week on rehearsal or RMS Coach. I wish it would play the first time I click play. Now screen recording. We are all set up, ready to go on RMS Coach. I have preloaded the MIDI track for The Lord Bless You and Keep You, and everybody is ready to go on Rehearsal Live Share. This is all happening in real time, and it is happening live as we are recording it. So here we go.
Oh Lord, bless you and keep you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace, and give you peace. The Lord make his face to shine upon you.
Yay, we did it. So, as you can hear, everything was perfectly aligned. I'm assuming the audio quality was not super high on this Zoom call, probably because we're having audio sharing issues, despite the fact that my screen share included audio the first time. Oh, well. But that video is on my website if you want to go back and listen. The audio quality is actually pretty high, and I think only one, maybe two of the computers that we were using had external microphones. One of them for sure was using the built-in computer microphone, and even without headphones. And that was the result that we got. It was very clear. You could hear everybody, and you could easily address specific things in real time. So this is just a picture of what the interface looks like. You can change where you're at using the timeline right here. And these are measure numbers. Since you're using a MIDI track, it knows exactly what measure, what beat you're on. Obviously, play, pause, stop, fast forward, rewind, go back to the beginning. There is a vamp tool as well, so you could loop a particular problematic section and just have that repeat over and over again. Because one of the challenges in using this program is that there's a delay from the point where you hit play to the point where you hear the audio back. And so when you hit stop, it actually takes a couple measures for it to stop, which is why you heard Katie in that last video continue on, because after you hit stop, the thing keeps playing for a little bit. But that's just one of the limitations that you have to work with in holding this kind of rehearsal. One thing that I forgot to mention is that you do have to download and install this program, which means that you need a Mac or a PC. There is an app, but it does not work with Rehearsal Live Share. They are still working on the Chromebook version of this, and I've been in contact with them. It actually does not do the Rehearsal Live Share component, which is what that video was of, for the Chromebook yet, but they are working on that. So hopefully we will get that in the near future. Moving on from RMS Coach, there are a number of resources out there which are low latency video conferencing platforms. And probably the most well-researched of these is SoundJack for use with classical music. This is a low latency audio and video program, and there are a whole lot of system requirements for you to be able to use something like this. You have to download and install the app. You really need to have an Ethernet connection, otherwise you're gonna get high latency. Anytime you're using Wi-Fi over Ethernet, the latency is just gonna be higher. You really need to have wired headphones, especially for something like this. It just will not work with Bluetooth. And it is best if you have an external microphone, but that kind of varies if you're using a Mac versus if you're using Windows, because there's some compatibility issues here that you can read about later on if you're interested in this. It works well for two people. I will say what we're about to watch a little snippet of is phenomenal performance for two people. It does not work as well for larger groups. And Dr. Ian Howell of the New England Conservatory has put together this fantastic basically completely comprehensive guide to using SoundJack for classical musicians. There are a couple other platforms very similar to this. There's one that I've heard people have had some good success with, which is called Jacktrip, and that is audio only. So you don't have the video component there, but it is extremely difficult to use and almost even more difficult to install. You have to kind of navigate through all these strange looking dialog boxes and use the terminal application on your Mac. So it's a challenge to get something like this to work, because you have to have control over so many settings to optimize your setup for as low latency as you could possibly get. But if you can do that, it is worth it. Let's listen to this little snippet here. And I'm going to fast forward.
Down a vein light shine you no more.
So they are able to, from remote locations, collaborate and work together musically in real time. So something like this would work really well for a private lesson studio, if you can invest the time and energy in getting this set up right. And you know, obviously this is not going to be as useful for a classroom type setting, because we don't necessarily know that our students can have access to a fast enough computer to use this, an Ethernet connection, and all those other various considerations that you have to take into account. But the resource exists, and it may be very helpful for some people. Here's a quick screenshot of the online interface. Basically, you have to create a stage to use SoundJack, and you can read all about this on the guide of how to navigate that and how to actually make the connection between your computer and another person's computer. This last one, I'm almost going to completely skip over it. I tested it and I have not gotten great results. It won't load all the tools that it's supposed to load every time you pull the page up, regardless of where I'm at or how I'm connecting or what computer I'm using. So if you're interested in this, it is still in testing and it is still in development. Digital Stage, it's essentially another version of SoundJack, but it is online without a download. But again, I haven't been able to get it to work yet, but I've heard that for people who do, it is very useful. So some final thoughts. Through the use of new software and sort of novel ways of employing this existing technology, we can actually hold rehearsals in a manner that allows for efficacy in evaluating and providing feedback, which I think are two of the most important things throughout this time period. It's how can we hear our singers regularly, not just on a video conference plunking pitches into the void and never knowing if they're getting it or not. All of these methods are ways to get that feedback from your students. And while we may not be able to move through repertoire at the pace to which we're accustomed, asynchronous and synchronous virtual rehearsal options can allow us to effectively continue a certain degree of ensemble-based instruction virtually. I do have a few people that I want to give a quick shout out to for really helping out with this presentation a lot. And before we wrap up and move on to the question phase, I do have another very short PowerPoint that we're going to get to on virtual performances. But I especially want to thank Adam Bendorf for assisting with tests and research for all this and kind of letting me get on Zoom and wear my tin hat in preparing for all this stuff. I want to thank Enrique Collazo for kind of letting me run wild with this at North Shore, especially over the summer. I want to send a big thank you to Sam Harris for his truly visionary leadership in Galena Park ISD. He has empowered our own district personnel to totally reimagine what fine arts instruction can be in order to be adaptable and effective through all this uncertainty. I want to thank Dr. Betsy Weber for her constant support and for helping me to test out some of these resources. Brady Knapp for trusting me to kind of use the Palmer Choir as guinea pigs for a lot of this stuff. And then last but not least to Katie White, Jake Woodson, JP Williams, Laura Liss, Kirsty McCallum, and everybody else who assisted in recording tracks for this. Really appreciate your time and for those who are there for putting up with technology strewn all over our apartment. I'm going to switch over real quick to this other presentation on virtual performances, and then we will have some time for questions. So this presentation will be on my website. We don't have time to go through all of it. I'm going to not get to any of the copyright material, but if that is something that you're interested in, it is online for you. I think most of us are probably aware of what a virtual performance is. Essentially, you know, just go watch one of the Eric Whitacre or pioneers of this genre of performing. There are two kind of different methods that you can use for putting something like this together. The first is audio and video separate, which I actually recommend for a number of reasons, which you can read on the slide. But you just get a better product on the audio side of things, which is honestly what I care about more than the visual side of things for something like this. And there are some cons, mostly in that it's harder to manage all the different files that you're using. You can also record audio and video together. There's a app right now that is in development. I think it's supposed to have been released by now, but I'm not sure that it is, called Choir Creator. And their app, you can read about it at choircreator.com. They have a quick test. It's a quick and easy way to put something like this together, but you cannot actually download everything for editing outside, so you're stuck with whatever you get from the students. But you can check that out on their website. The cons with doing audio and video together are mostly that you have to manually strip the audio off of the video and then pull it into a separate program to edit it and align it and then send it back and put everything together. And any edits that you make to the audio are not actually going to be reflected in the video because the video was recorded before your final audio was done. In this method, you record your audio and then send the final version to the singers, who will then record a lip sync video along with it. And note that you can also use soundtrap.com to have singers record audio and save tons of time in the editing process because you don't actually have to align it at all. It will already be recorded. You can hit the little 3 dots at the edge of each track and download each track individually and then edit it on an external digital audio workstation. So software, again, go to my website for this link, but this is the Pro Apps Bundle for Education from Apple. It is $600 worth of software for $200. And then I have put together a step-by-step guide for editing a virtual performance together using Logic Pro and nothing but the tools that come with that Pro Apps suite. So go to my website to check that out. It's a PDF document with pictures that walks you through every step of the process. The video editing, I do not know very much about because I have not actually done the video side of things for this yet. I do the audio, and my colleague Adam Bendorf is the one who's the Final Cut guru now after all of his time spent learning it over the summer. But you basically have to go in, line it all up, and then you can insert lots of video wall plugins to make it look fancy, or you can just manually resize them and make them static. However, I do want to direct you to 2 different places if all of this sounds super overwhelming and you want one of these products, but you don't want to go to the legwork of putting it together yourself. Adam and I are actually able to do these projects, and you can go to virtualchoirhelp.com to check out our website and read about some of the things that we offer with that, and submit a form for a quote there as well. And then Ryan Jones at St. Luke's UMC Houston is fantastic at putting these together, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention him in this presentation because he's kind of who I bug on Messenger with questions when I'm not sure about something about all of this audio editing side of things. So he does fantastic work for St. Luke's and is able to do it very quickly as well. The remainder of this presentation is on navigating copyright, and unfortunately we do not have time to get to that today, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here and present for this presentation. I was so excited for this opportunity to share some of these resources with colleagues and friends, and hopefully be able to provide some potential solutions for all the various litany of problems that we are all going to run into undoubtedly this year. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Would you talk about the difference between the education and free version of the SoundCloud?
Yes, we have a question asking if I can talk about the difference between the free and the educational version of Soundtrap. Primarily, oh, okay, Cheryl, I miss you. Thank you. Sorry, primarily, the difference is that, number one, there's a walled garden. So if you have students who are under the age of 13 years old, that means that they can legally use the platform without interacting with anybody outside of your EDU bubble. So if you are a middle school and you have singers who are under the age of 13, using the free version is not in accordance with their privacy policy. So the EDU version, there is no age limit. You can use it in whatever context you wish. And I think that the Google Classroom integration is extremely helpful. It will save a lot of time in getting everything set up.
Is there a limited number of students for the account? How many students are allowed to use?
Do you mean on a limited number of students per project?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I have uploaded a lot of audio files to a Soundtrap project, and I have not yet hit a limit. Obviously, there is a, your computer processing power will be a limitation that you'll run into. Obviously, if you have hundreds of tracks in a project, it may take a very long time to load and you may have playback issues. But one way around that, and actually a kind of backdoor that we used for this very presentation, is what you saw on the AMC website with buttons dedicated to specific subsets of last names. I actually took the spreadsheet of participants and figured out, okay, how many people do we have of this name, and divided the alphabet up amongst 25 different Soundtrap projects so that we wouldn't have an issue with too many people trying to access it all at the same time. So what I do for collecting recordings for virtual performances is I create a project per voice part, and that also prevents singers running into issues where where they get in there and they're hearing all 4 parts and they can't really distinguish their part out from that. And then in that scenario, they would have to go in and mute tracks. But if you have just a soprano track and the sopranos have the link to only the soprano track, they will go in there, use the practice track that already exists, and you won't have any issues with with them getting thrown off by another part being present. Plus, it limits the number of people that are using that one project. I do not believe that even in the free version, I don't think there is a limit to the number of Soundtrap projects you can create total. If there is, I haven't run into it yet, and I have probably 30 or 40 on Soundtrap of various different tests, along with the 25 that we use today for this session. So I hope that answers that question.
Can the educational version be linked to the Canvas or Schoology?
Yes, it will work with Canvas and Schoology. I don't think that you can import over the accounts in the same way, but the students can create their accounts using their school district email addresses, and you may actually be able to, we haven't crossed that bridge of actually setting up the EDU accounts for North Shore yet, so I don't know how that process looks. It should happen in the next week or so. But if you are using Canvas or Schoology, there is a share button. Let me see if I can just get to it real quick and show you. There's a share button that generates a link just like you would send to anybody using right here, using Google Drive. And they click that link, it takes them to the sign up page, and they create an account and sign in and use it. Now, actually, Carolyn Cruz messaged me during this presentation because she already had an EDU account for her own use. And there is one issue right now with Soundtrap. If you have an EDU account specifically with a walled garden enabled, you will not be able to access a project outside of your walled garden, even if you are the director, which is, can be a little bit frustrating, but I actually have 2 accounts that I switch between, one with my school district email address, one free one with my personal email address, and we used the personal email addresses account today so that we could make sure that everybody could access it. So you can circumvent that by having 2 accounts as a director, but know that if you were to try and do some sort of collaboration between your school and another school, you would run into that issue. Now, in Galena Park, we are planning on putting together a district-wide virtual choir, and we're going to use Soundtrap to make those recordings. And we have requested that the company set up our bubble as one giant bubble over the whole district so that we don't run into that issue. But that is one thing to keep in mind if you're going to go for the EDU version of Soundtrap, is that you're restricted to your bubble. Now, you can actually ask them to get rid of the walled garden for your EDU accounts, but that will affect all of them, and it will completely remove it from all of them. There's not right now a feature to be able, unfortunately, there's not a big feature to access specific, like grant EDU account access to specific projects, if that makes sense.
The recording earlier, the library
Yes.
is there any way they can listen to it?
Well, there is not a way that we can listen to the full version because, again, we were on 25 different projects because I wasn't sure how many people were going to show up. We can pull up one of them, though, and let's see, soundtrap.com. Let's do number 19. I don't know who was in 19, but you're in the hot seat now. And let me try doing a new. Oh, asking what the question was. The question was, can we hear the Lord Bless You and Keep You from today's recordings? I'm going to do a new screen share. Maybe we can get the audio going properly this time. It does not look like anybody actually recorded on this one. Let's see. Well, maybe we could circle back to this at the end if there are other questions. 14. Oh, cool. And this is strange what you're looking at. I've not had this issue occur yet where evidently the last project opened, even if it wasn't by you, will be the one at the top, it looks like. Or maybe the last one saved. There we go. Okay. Let's give this a whirl. 1 and 2 and breathe.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you.
And actually, everybody who had recorded a track prior to this also made their track in Soundtrap to begin with. They just did it obviously prior to this presentation, so I would have enough time to download them and re-upload them into 25 various projects. You could feasibly actually put together a kind of a virtual performance using Soundtrap only if you didn't want to go in and edit anything. But what you would want to do in that kind of scenario is have your singers record several different takes, and then you can go through and cherry pick and cut and paste the best version of all of their takes together. If you were going to do that route, my recommendation would be to have each singer use their own Soundtrap project. One of the things that we're going to be doing is in Galena Park, and this assignment is in that resources folder that was sent out earlier. It's also on my website. It's a Soundtrap self-interview, teaching them how to make a new project on Soundtrap, and then it gives them some questions to choose from. They read the questions and count to like 20, and then read the next one and count to 20. And then they go back, create a new track, listen to themselves asking the question, and then they respond themselves. So they're interviewing themselves, and it's teaching them, number 1, how to create a project, number 2, how to create a new track, number 3, the fact that you can go back and listen to what you've already recorded, so that you know, in the hopes of later on after they sing, they're like, I don't know if that was my best take. And then they'll go back and listen and, oh, no, I need to go back and redo the spot. Yeah, feel free to ask any additional questions if you have them now, or if you had any issues accessing Soundtrap, feel free to bring those up as well, and we can kind of discuss those and how to circumvent that. Obviously, the EDU issue is rather disappointing. Tell us about what kind of computer you use to process all of these sound projects. I'm using a MacBook Pro, but I mean, I actually right now have, here, I'll show you my setup. I've got a PC going over here from school. I'm on a Chromebook for the video, Mac going over here, and an iPad here with my presentation outline. But the Mac, I've noticed, performs significantly better than the Chromebook and the PC do on Soundtrap. But the difference is that it just takes a little longer to load the project initially. It doesn't really perform any poorer when you're playing back and recording, from my experience so far. Yes, Mac. Oh, I don't actually know how much RAM I have on this. But.
Nick, did you do the poll? Have you done the poll? Okay, I think that we have done then. We're good. Anything else, Ryan?
I don't have anything else, but if there are any additional questions. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time. Oh, I do have a question. I'm having problems getting in the Soundtrap project. Is there an easier way to join the project, or do you have to have a Google account? We are a Microsoft district. I believe you can use any email address to sign up for Soundtrap. I have not actually used a non-Google account to sign up for it. There's also a Facebook option to sign in. I have noticed that. So if you have a Facebook account, obviously you can just port over your Facebook email. So I would assume that there is also a reliable way to sign up with email, though you probably have to enter additional information if you take that route, because it can't just pull your information from Google like it does when you sign in with Google. If you're having issues signing into the project itself, it could be if there's already a Soundtrap account that's associated with your email address, or if maybe someone has logged in before you and it hasn't fully logged out. I have noticed a couple issues with that happening. So if you go to Soundtrap and it takes you to something that isn't a sign up page, look for a logout button. I think it's in the top right-hand corner. That might fix the issue. But I'd have to kind of look at it from your end of things to be able to troubleshoot that specific error.
Nick, you want to close the workshop? Yeah, we're good.
All right. Thank you, everybody.